Good morning, yes, Guy. Once more onto the breach. Here we go. We're in the Huey, and we are currently at Charleroi in Belgium. I hope you can hear me. Hope everyone's good. We're gonna just sort a few things out here, get the map sorted, and we're gonna head north and continue our story today on the Battle of Waterloo. So we're in the Huey, and let's just make sure we've got the weather on live. It's been a bit miserable in the last few days in southern Belgium, and so we've had to turn it off, but we have got the live weather on, so that's good. Though it looks a bit miserable up to the north. Anyway, welcome to the channel, everybody. I hope you're all well. And what is this channel? Well, this is Flight Past, and my name is Simon, and we use the satellite technology of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 to investigate the event of history And so we've been looking at several different parts of history. We've looked at D-Day, and in this playlist we're looking at Waterloo. And we followed, not just Waterloo, we followed the journey of Napoleon from Elba all the way up here to southern Belgium. And the flight simulator allows us to have a look at the terrain, allows us to get down low and use the drone and look at the fields and look at the distances, and it gives us a really good insight into the distances that the armies had to cover. So we're here in Charleroi, and believe it or not, this is the end of the first day of the campaign of Waterloo. The French get just north of here, and if you're interested in listening to that part of the campaign, you can go back and you'll see on YouTube there's a whole playlist of videos, and you'll find the one you want. And we're going to head north. If we can see anything, we hopefully can. It will clear, but if not, I'll change the weather again so that we can actually follow this this story properly. It looks like it's clearing a little bit here. Make sure I'm going the right way. I think I'm going a little bit east. There we go. We're heading around to this place called they call it Les Bonvilliers here. It's actually Frasnes was the place, and this was just a recap here for anyone who's joining. This is where Ney basically had his headquarters on the evening of the 15th of June 1815, and then this is where the attacks of the French come along up this road here towards the battlefield of Quatre Bras. In the distance you can see Marbais there. You should be able to see Wagnele here, and that's the right hand flank, furthest position right of the Prussian army on the 16th, and this area where these four white lines are is basically signifies the area of the Battle of Ligny, and Fleurus is over here. This was essentially where Napoleon was on the 16th. So we'll fly up this road here, and you should be able to see coming up on the battlefield of Quatre Bras. Now, we've spoken in depth about this this battle, and we spoke about Ligny. There's I've been doing live streams. They go on for about 3 hours each, so we slow roll this sort of stuff. So if you're interested in seeing any of that, they're on YouTube, and you can go back and watch those battles. In the last stream, we actually got to around about what was known as sort of the second phase of the Battle of Waterloo, which was the attack of d'Erlon's corps on the eastern side of the battlefield of Waterloo. So we're just going to fly up there gently now, and we'll do a recap as we go along. Oh, by the way, Guy, you're wearing blue today, and you're a girl. So this... just here, I believe, coming up. This area is the battlefield of Quatre Bras, where my white dot is now. And so actually, if I my white dot is sort of tracing where the Wellington's army was, and down below here was where the French were and the French artillery. As I say, you can go back and look into this battle. It's really, really interesting. And this happened on the 16th of June, 1815. So this is the battlefield of Quatre Bras right here below us now. And on the 17th of June, Wellington retires. Basically over on his eastern side, the Prussians have been defeated, not totally defeated, but bloody-nosed. And they are eventually going to retire up to Wavre in the north east up here. And so this forces Wellington to retreat back to a position that he had witnessed himself in 1814 that he had his signal corps map, and that was the position of the ridge at Mont St Jean, which is just south of Waterloo. And it's a very subtle battlefield. It shows basically that the British and Wellington had an eye for a battlefield, and it had a number of good defensive positions in front of a ridge, and the ridge provided a reverse slope, and it was the classic tactic that Wellington had heard from a battle that was actually in I think it was 1807 down in 1807 or 1804. Can't remember which now. It was one down in Naples, basically, where a British commander had managed to defeat a column of French with a line. So that was developed, and Napoleon and Wellington developed that reverse slope tactic. Here's the Genappe. This was the scene of a sort of a bottleneck on the way back, and British artillery under Captain Cavalry Mercer, Major MacDonald, Royal Horse Artillery were involved in a rearguard action in this area. We believe somewhere just here where this white dot is, as the French vanguard started to press them, and they managed to get pushed back onto their retreating infantry, all moving up this road here. And the weather was really bad, by the way. You know, it's some thunderstorms and lightning, very, very frightening. Right. The way this channel works is that I will waffle on for a long time, and then every 20 minutes I'll just take a break. So don't expect the battle to be finished today. I'm an amateur historian, and I love looking at these battlefields and looking at the terrain, and so I do it for my own benefit, not for yours. But you're my co-pilot. You can help me out, and if you've got any questions, then let's leave them on the side there, and we'll look at them. We're looking here. By the way, this is Napoleon's last headquarters. It's the farmhouse at Le Caillou. That's here. So he spent this is the night of the 17th here. Just down below here is the Maison de Roi. That's believed to be Ney's headquarters, and then there was a farmhouse called Rossom, and I believe it might be this one of these places here. I mentioned Rossom a few times. Someone mentioned where is that. In fact, if I just pause here, this is the advantage of using the sim. Just jump out. So Rossom. Is one of these places here, I believe. And if anybody does know which one it is, then let me know. If this looks like a working farm. So it may be this place here. Has it got a name on it? It doesn't have a name. I think it's this place here. It's just after that bend. And it could be this place on here, actually, on the... One of these places, anyway. I don't think it's that one. It might be that one there. This is essentially Napoleon's headquarters during the actual battle on the 18th. And so you can see it's a little bit further behind. And so you can sort of get the sense that Napoleon was delegating a lot more of the battlefield decisions to his corps commanders and to Ney. He may have just been doing the sort of general overall strategic organization. But he was not like Wellington was, who Wellington was very much with his men in near the front line and following, moving along the crest on the ridge to the crisis points each time. So he was definitely more aware of the tactical situation than Napoleon was. And there's rumours that, of course, we know that Napoleon was having some problems with his health. He had a bit of a lethargy going on, especially after the Battle of Ligny, and so we're not sure how his health was panning out on this day, and it may be that under stressful situations he had relapses, but he wasn't always present at the front to make decisions. And so yes, this is if you remember, we spoke about phases of the battle. The first phase was over here. We're just over here on these in these trees just here where the white dot is now, and this is the Chateau of Hougoumont. And essentially Napoleon decides that he's going to use Rail's corps, Jerome's divisions on this left-hand side to start the battle, and he's essentially trying to press Wellington's right flank. He senses, and he's right to sense that Wellington is sensitive to any attempt to outflank him on his right flank, and so immediate pressure is on this position here of the Chateau of Hougoumont. And this is a battle that rages all day long, and it's supposed to be one that draws in the reserves from Wellington's centre, and what it actually does is it kind of drains the resources of Rail's corps into it, and so the numbers pan out that there are less Anglo-Dutch troops there defending it than there are French troops attacking it. And Wellington is very aware as well that he's trying to strike a balance, basically, between making sure that the place doesn't fall. He knows how important it is, because his right flank falling would mean he would probably have to pull back straight away, because he can't risk being driven off the battlefield and driven off to the east or northeast, because he wants to fall back on Antwerp is his target if he had to pull back. So it was very important to Wellington that the position of Hougoumont holds. But he's also very aware that the tactic of Napoleon is basically trying to draw his reserves, Wellington's reserves, from the centre, where this pile of dirt is here, where the white dot is, across to the left there, so that then he can then strike with his reserves straight through the centre. So that's effectively the first phase of the battlefield, of the Battle of Waterloo. Then we mentioned in the last stream, we were talking about the second phase of the Battle of Waterloo. This begins around about 1:30, 2 o'clock. By the way, the battle begins at around about 11:30. About 1:30, 2 o'clock, the second phase begins, and it's essentially on the centre and right-hand side of the battlefield. If you are the French and Wellington's left flank, and it begins with a bombardment by the Grand Battery, around about 80 guns, and they start firing on this position down below us here. This is where Picton's divisions are, and there's La Haye-Sainte is under attack, and we've got skirmishers and in this area tirailleurs, and we've got the 95th Rifles just below us here, and that bombardment is preparatory to the attack of de Erlon's corps of infantry, which are on this side of the battlefield here on this ridge right below us now. And they advanced then after this bombardment. Now the bombardment hasn't been as effective as it possibly could have been because of the weather. The soil is a silty loam and it's very sticky, and so a lot of the cannonballs are basically just embedding into the ground. And we've obviously got this ridge that is covering the Allied troops, and Picton's got his divisions essentially on the other side of the road, the Orhain Road, which runs along the top here, and he's got them lying down as well. So apart from some Dutch troops who are on this forward slope here, because the road actually comes down this section here, most of the Picton's divisions are behind here. And you've got the farm of Papalot and the villages of Smolhain and Hay on the right, and you've got La Haye-Saint here on the left, and so that narrows the front that the French have to advance up. But they come up in these it's a kind of a new tactics, but it's kind of like a wide column is the best way to describe it. It's the de Erlon is familiar with Wellington's tactics of having these lines facing his columns, and so here he's actually organised his infantry into these sort of wider columns to enable a bigger front of fire. They advance up this slope here where the white dot is, and heading towards that ridge there. I'm going to stay in the helicopter, by the way, just for as long as we can, and then because we've done all this before. If you want more detail, then go back to the previous episodes, and you'll get a much more detailed outlook. So these columns of French start to advance, and let's spin around and we can fly the route. They advance by the left in echelon formation. Each French column is probably about 150 meters across, and you just spin around here. So they're going to be advancing across this ground here. And it's described, remember, I think it was Victor Hugo who mentioned it's like a sea, a swelling sea, the land here. And if we got down low, you'll see that it's actually sort of a series of waves of very subtle geography. See this way it curves up, and there's a wave here onto this ridge here, and this is where the British are on the other side of this road there. Road is sunken, by the way, and so when we hear Captain Mercier talk, it's a lot of the times his guns are on that road, and the barrels just sticking over the top of it. Anyway, this infantry moves up onto the up to the ridge, and when it gets to the top of the ridge, you essentially get Picton's ordering his men up and then firing. And there's a lot of confusion at this point. At the same time, there's a cuirassier attack around La Haye-Saint that has caught some Hanoverians infantry out in the open. Then they're caught without not being able to form square. And obviously smoke and all this sort of stuff is going on, and fire from the left flank, and what is believed to happen is that de Erlon is then ordering his columns to start basically forming up into lines and to fire back on the British. Now, we believe that round about this time, some Uxbridge orders a charge. It's possibly a counter charge on the cuirassiers around La Haye-Saint, but they go then further and then go into the French infantry, and they catch them in this sort of maneuver of trying to form a line. And these approximately 1,000 cavalrymen charging down the slope obliterating the French infantry in the process. And that charge, the cavalry, it's meant to be recognized as a very key moment of the battlefield, and one that the cavalry intervention was very, very timely, but in their exuberance, literally some of them were heard crying "On to Paris." That was how sort of triumphant they felt. They overextended their charge, and they got down into this area below us here, and they could see the Grand Battery, where the Grand Battery was, and they started to attack that. And effectively, they'd blown out their horses. Their horses were overcharged, and they got countercharged by some lancers. And effectively, they took about lost about half of their strength in this charge, and were essentially out of the battle for the rest of the day. It was so exuberant that Uxbridge was the commander, was involved in the charge. Ponsonby, one of the Union Brigade commanders, he's killed in this area around here. His horse gets stuck in the mud down here. Ironically, because his horse that he was going to ride was too expensive, and the army only gave compensation at a fixed rate, but his horse was really, really expensive. So he actually borrowed one of his ADC's horses, and that got stuck in the mud, and that eventually meant he was killed. So Uxbridge is involved in the charge. Now he should really be at the back. He says that they were trying to recall the cavalry, but it effectively came to the end of the sort of main body of British cavalry. So British cavalry is renowned for having this sort of fox hunting spirit, and they were very good with this, in the first throes of battle, but they didn't seem to show any control. And Wellington said this as well all the time, that he was like, they would just charge as anything. And you can see the difference when we'll move on to how the French cavalry attack, and they would attack in waves upon waves upon waves, and they would always be a lot more in control. And it shows, you see, that they basically had a lot more experience in campaigning over the years than the British cavalry had, and they showed a lot more control. So they wouldn't blow their horses so soon. They wouldn't be all in on a fight, and they showed a lot more control on the battlefield. Okay, so that is essentially where we got to on the last stream. So I would like to welcome everybody who has joined. I'd like to thank people who have followed over the last few days, and appreciate it for you for doing that. We're on about I'll see that it says, look, I think it's about 76, is it? 76 people on Twitch are following, and we've got about 30 odd people now in YouTube. So if you are one of those people, thank you very much. You are the early pioneers of the channel and will always be appreciated. And I'd like to thank people who have contributed over the past few days in asking questions and saying hello. It's always great to see. And it's a bit of a, as you can see, it's a bit of a sort of a chat. It's not a lecture. I'm trying to still find out where the best place to put the channel, whether it's education or flight sim or whatever. It's kind of in this niche area, but if you appreciate what I'm trying to do, then just a simple like and a subscribe is great, and you can follow the journey. I am going to try and improve the way I talk and the way I present things, and any feedback then in that area would be greatly appreciated too. And as for what the channel is about, well, we go into great detail these situations that we're talking about, these historical situations, and I've got a few ideas of where I want to go next. We'll be looking at places. I think the next place will be the Falklands War. We will look at First World War, the trench system. I wanted to fly from the Alps to the sea following the 1915 position of the trenches. We'll probably do Dunkirk and Operation Market Garden, Barbarossa. We'll look in some of the southern Italy campaigns of Second World War, Alamein. I want to look at the Anglo-Zulu War, the American Civil War, English Civil War, Vietnam, and also not necessarily always military. We will look at other aspects of history. Anything that a view like this, an oversight, would help. And if you have any suggestions, then put them in the comments, and I will endeavour, if it piques my interest, to read up on it and present it. Now, I am an amateur historian, so I do try to do some research for it, but if anyone can help out and knows any knowledge about these subjects, then please join in. I would love to get some military historians in discussing this. And apart from that, you can join in on the flying side of things. If you've got Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, come and join me. I'm just south of Belgium, and I stream most days, and it will usually be around about the UK lunchtime. Right, and what I tend to do then is take a break. Every 20 odd minutes or so, we'll take a break, and so if you're watching live, I'll be gone for a couple of minutes. You'll listen to some music, which is my music, so if you like that, that's another way to support the channel, by going and finding it on Spotify or iTunes or wherever, and it's under E. Paraton. And if you're watching on YouTube now, then you will see above a bunch of postcards popping up. You can see, go to different playlists if you want to catch up. Otherwise, just click the next video and you'll find me again in a few minutes. Right, so on that note then, when we get back, by the way, we will start on, I suppose we'll call it Phase 3 of the Battle of Waterloo. See you in a moment. Welcome to Flight Past. My name is Simon, and for all you YouTube short people, this is the battlefield of Waterloo, and I am flying a Huey helicopter over the top of the panorama of the Battle of Waterloo. And we are using the Microsoft Flight Simulator to look at the key events in history, and we've been following Napoleon's journey from Elba all the way to this point here. If you love history and you love flying, then follow us on the channel. You can see the link below. Come and join in the discussion about this wonderful battle. And today we're going to continue that story by looking at the third phase of the battle, which is essentially when the cuirassiers of the French start to attack the British centre at Waterloo. Okay, there's a little bit of a trailer there, so I can chop it up later. For all your normal people, we'll start talking about the actual battlefield now. So the time is around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the French artillery over here are below us in this position where the white dot is, are continuing to bombard the ridge. The cavalry charge of the Union Brigade is finished, and Mercer, Captain Mercer, Cavalry Mercer, who wrote his memoir about the Battle of Waterloo, and is one of the primary sources of someone who was there, who's we can learn a lot from. He remembers being in a conversation with Colonel Gould at around about this time. Now, Mercer, I believe, is where my white dot is now, is somewhere along this ridge here. He's got a Royal Horse Artillery battery. And essentially, he's tasked with riding along this road here, from this woods up to the woods near Rougemont, essentially trying to find gaps and fill gaps and go to points of crisis. He speaks to Colonel Gould at this time and describes how desperate he thought the situation would be. And Colonel Gould goes, "This is really bad. Do you think we should be considering retreating at this time?" So let me just jump out here and we can just see if we can get a sense of where he might have been when he had this conversation. So I believe the British cavalry attack comes across in this direction here. We're flying over the crossroads between the road down to Charleroi, and this is known as the Ohain Road, which is also the sunken way, a hollow way. And it's believed possibly that Captain Mercer's Royal Horse Artillery is somewhere maybe along this road here. I don't think this section here, by the way, was described as being quite a deep sunken bit. It's been removed. It's possibly that these banks have been removed and made into that pile of dirt there. This was described as being 15 foot down, so you can see it's definitely been reduced. So that was for the first 100 yards. So the other option is he's somewhere over here, more than 100 yards when it comes out. But he's probably on this side of the road, the main highway, the chaussee, when he has this conversation. So Colonel Gould is basically saying, should we retreat? And he thinks that retreating down this road here, this single road here back towards Brussels, is going to be an absolute disaster. This is the forest here of Saulnier. Forget the buildings. There is a village of Mont St Jean, but most of this stuff wasn't. It was just a forest. And if you remember, they were prepared to retreat because in the evening before, Captain Mercer was asked to try to find alternative routes to the main road through the forest, and one that would essentially lead to the west of Brussels, so on this side of the road, somewhere here. He had to try and find a route. So they were definitely scouting ways to get off the battlefield to protect, again, the right flank of Wellington and keep off the main road, which would be probably used for any retreating infantry. Now, Colonel Gould just believes that at this point, then it's going to be an absolute disaster to do that. Captain Mercer replies to him, he says that it does indeed look very bad, but I trust that the Duke, who I am sure will get us out of it somehow or another. Now, he admits he says this in earshot of his men at the time, but he does say later that he thought the situation was desperate. And he had already decided that in case that he had to retreat, then he would spike his own guns, and he would try to escape the battlefield by not using the main high road. And this is the first time as well that we start to get a sense of an imminent cavalry attack coming. He describes a dark mass of cavalry appeared for an instant on the main ridge and then came sweeping down the slope in swarms, reminding me of an enormous surf bursting over the prostrate hull of a stranded vessel and then running, hissing and foaming up the beach. They were lancers, hussars and dragoons in complete melee. He also reports that so that sounds like that was a description of the actual British cavalry attack, doesn't it? Oh no, lancers and hussars. Yeah, it sounds like it's French. He also talks about this time as well that he fires upon some columns of infantry pushing forward from he calls it Merk Brain, and let me just have a look on the map here because I'm not familiar with that. So we'll just zoom in on South Belgium, and we're here at number 6. When he says Merk Brain, what does he mean? I mean, there's Brain allude. This is Ohain, so that's what the name of the road is named after. So I'm not sure where he's talking about when he mentions this is the only place called Brain, La Lourde. So what he essentially, so it's hard to know where he's talking about there. If anybody knows, let me know. It's he basically describes that there's 2 columns of infantry pushing forward, and he fires upon them, but they're actually Belgium. They're wearing blue uniforms, and they were singing, but they were singing in French, so they just got fired upon, which seems a bit of a silly. Around about, so he could then have been on this side when he was talking about that. But he describes this anyway as the sort of a close of the second sort of phase of the battlefield. And then he says, remembers he got an order from Sir Augustus Fraser, and he was told that to limber up as fast as he could and presumably come over to this area here. So Augustus Fraser said there was reports that the French had amassed a huge amount of heavy cavalry at about 1/3 distance between Hougoumont and the Charleroi road. Right, what does 1/3 distance mean? So if we're talking about Hougoumont and the Charleroi road, this is Hougoumont here below us, this building here, and the Charleroi road is this road over here. So he says 1/3 distance between Hougoumont and Charleroi road. So let's assume then that it's either then going to be here, in this area here, or it's going to be here, in this area here. In this sort of area. And that probably makes more sense for it to be here. He tells Mercer as well that as soon as he gets into position, he would probably be charged. And that if he was charged, then to retreat to the nearest infantry square. So this is the ridge of Mont St Jean. It might look a bit different today because of this big pile of dirt. But if say he's in this area here, and then we've got all this area here would be where the infantry regiments are all behind here, and they'll be getting into square. Let's keep on flying for a bit. Mercer carries on. He describes the atmosphere at the moment as being suffocatingly hot. They're enveloped in smoke, and above and around the sound and the incessant roar of cannon and musketry, you could hear a mysterious humming. Cannon shot ploughed the ground in all directions, and the hail of ball and bullets seemed so thick that even extending an arm was a risk lest it be torn off. So he describes his position as being given between two squares of Brunswick infantry, and he was aware that these were the same troops who panicked on the retreat the previous day, and therefore he was conscious of the effect of their morale if his gunners retired to their squares. It is thought that his deployment initially saved the Brunswickers, and although he would not be rewarded for this act, Captain Baines witnessed the Duke, on seeing Mercer's troop move in, say, "Ah, that's the way I like to see horse artillery move." So he's given a position with the Brunswickers, is all we can say right now. Now remember, this is when, at this time, Napoleon, around about 3:30, he receives a dispatch from Grouchy that was sent from Walheim at 11:30. Walheim is at least 10 miles in this direction over here. And it's obvious at this point to Napoleon that there's no way that Grouchy is going to be able to get to this battlefield, and it also meant got some weird textures popping up here. It also means that the Prussians now coming this way from this direction here, where this weird textures are, will now be able to arrive on the battlefield base essentially unmolested. So in terms from Napoleon's point of view, then he is actually fully committed now to this battle. It's not going to be he's not going to be able to extradite himself from this battlefield at all. So it because if he did, it would most likely mean the end of his rule. He would probably be committing political suicide, and by doing so, showing weakness. And so he's now fully committed to having either to get Wellington off this ridge as soon as possible, or be defeated. And so the order goes to Ney, and is the urgency now to capture La Haye-Sainte, which is this building down here, which is at the centre front position of Wellington's line. And what we are starting to get is Prussians appearing out of the woods, the Paris woods on the right. And so the amount of troops now able to support Ney starts to decline. Ney needs to capture this position as soon as possible, and the problem is that he's taken he's so fixated on doing this that he forgets that he needs to organize his infantry as well at the same time. And so both d'Erlon and Reille, remember, they're already committed troops to Hougoumont and to the right flank. They're not given enough time to reorganize, and Ney is impatient at the best of times. So Reille's finding it difficult to recall troops from the Hougoumont area, and d'Erlon's trying to reorganize his shattered troops that have been smashed by the household cavalry over here. And this leaves Ney with not much infantry support down the centre. So in the end, there's around about 2 battalions of infantry managed to get into this area around La Haye-Sainte, and they're quite easily repulsed. Napoleon tries to get Duret to intensify his attack over here at Papelotte and La Haye to cut off the communications, but essentially between Wellington and Boulou, and essentially try to cut off this ridge, this road, to make it difficult for the Prussians to reinforce Wellington's centre. So around about this time, Mercer describes how the Allied infantry on the right flank formed up in square with the guns between them, and every now and then he observes torrents of French cavalry sweeping over this ridge. After each wave, the squares could still be seen. He fears a cavalry attack on his position at any time. So he's over essentially on this side here, in this area, and the infantry have formed square because Ney, impetuous Ney, has decided to attack with his cuirassiers without any infantry support. So that enables British infantry to form square. There's also there's stories of Ney observing that the flanks or the British units are retiring. He believes that they might be retreating into the wood. Now, we don't know essentially what he saw, but it could basically be that he was observing Wellington jigging his line. And so if, say, Ney is in this position over here, possibly at La Belle Alliance, in this area anyway, probably around here somewhere, he observes, or thinks he observes, the infantry retreating. And it could have been that it was just essentially Wellington drawing in after the failed attack on his left flank. He could have been tightening his centre, drawing troops back in this way, or even pulling troops back along this ridge here. And it's a trigger for Ney to think that they've got the Anglo-Dutch army on the run, and he sends in the cavalry before de Erlon and Rail could organise any infantry support. Around about this time as well, we're concentrating on Mercer's account. If he's in this area here somewhere, he observes the beginnings of the attack. He grows impatient. He says, standing idle and growing annoyed with the light artillery, he says, on the Nivelles Road. So when we talk about the Nivelles Road, then he's talking about down here somewhere. So he's obviously getting attacked from this area somewhere by light 9-pounders, essentially. And he disobeys orders and actually engages in a counter-battery fire. Of which he says he's then, because he's now revealed his position, he's fired upon immediately by, he says, around about 6 guns of very superior caliber. And so he orders his guns immediately to stop firing. So the French gun is actually a 4-pounder. So when he says the Nivelles Road, this is the Nivelles Road there. So it makes you think that he's on this ridge somewhere. These trees, by the way, weren't here on this side. So it could possibly be that they were getting some sort of fire from in this direction here. And he has one of his troopers injured with a shattered arm from this sort of harassing fire. His fellow battery commander was Captain Bolton. He's supposed to be somewhere on his left position. They come under heavy fire, and Captain Bolton is killed at this point. And he then describes how a horse is unharnessed and sort of shooed away, but the horse refuses to leave, and it has its lower part of its head taken off by a cannon shot. And Mercer has to order a farrier to go over and put the horse out of his misery by running a sabre through its heart. So Mercer's describing the scene that we can see here. So on this 18th of June, 1815, if you were here at around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, what you'll be seeing is and hearing is the roar of cannon and musketry fire on the main position, which doesn't slacken. And he says the smoke is thick, and from time to time, dense columns of smoke rise like pillars, with mushroom heads marking the position of exploding ammunition wagons. He describes how eventually a corps of French cavalry directs its course upon them from along the ridge. So I'm thinking it might even be along here somewhere. And but before they could lead a charge home, they are engaged by a regiment of light dragoons from the King's German Legion, who trotted up from the ravine to attack their flank. So unfortunately, this modern road has cut through this section of the battlefield, but it's likely that there was some sort of ravine in this area somewhere. And I think what they're talking about is that these cavalry had come around, or essentially were trying to come up here at the time. So, just before this, and we were talking about Ney mistaking possibly some reorganisation from Wellington at this point for a retreat. And it is at this point that Wellington seizes the opportunity. This is just after the British cavalry charges. He takes the opportunity to reorganise his line. Kempt is given charge of Picton's division. Remember, Picton was killed. And he sends the flank companies of the Nassau battalion previously posted in the Hougoumont woods across to reinforce Bering at Le Hay. So he's taken some Nassaus who are first of all, they were here. So they were light company, skirmishing kind of troops. And they're brought back and they're moved across. And they're probably going, "Hey, we're out of the battle," and then he sends them into this place here. I think it might be retribution for having fired on him in the morning, possibly. And if you want to know that story, then listen to the previous episodes. So he gives the Nassau's the opportunity to reinforce Major Bering, who is at La Haye-Sainte. Bering at this point as well has lost the orchard, which is this area here, and the gardens at the back are in the French hands. So he's basically surrounded almost, but he's still in the buildings themselves. Somehow Wellington gets a message through to Bering. I think there's a gate at the back here. Gets a message through to Bering at this time to say concentrate on the defence of the farm, block up the southern gate, and then he rides into the sand pit here, supposedly, and inspects the 1st battalion of the 95th Rifles. Now remember, Byland, he was over here in this area and forward of the slope, and they had retreated back possibly 400 yards, probably into an area around about here. They hadn't completely routed off the battlefield, but they were showing signs that they were reorganizing and being able to receive orders again. And just prior to we know that there was some infantry sent against La Haye-Sainte at this point in time, from Donzelat and Creel's and Bachelou's and Foy's divisions. The troops were they were regular battalions marched in open order on a front of 500 yards wide that straddles the Genappe road, so they're coming up here. And the Allied skirmishers are forced back. But on this side here, Kemp's line is, and they force they repel the French on this side. On the western side of the road, the French are prevented from advancing onto the main Allied line by artillery fire essentially coming down from this way here. And so this battle is essentially now becomes hand-to-hand combat in this area. And the French begin to set their buildings on fire, and essentially, Bering managed to defend this position most of the day, and the French are struggling to get into this building. They're either trying to come up this way and they're meeting the 95th Rifles and Kemp's Brigade, or they're trying to come up this way and they're getting attacked by shot by artillery. And they can't quite get into this building. But what they don't know is that Bering is actually running out of ammunition right now, and that the Allies can't reinforce them or supply them. At this time as well, we believe that Napoleon realigns his ground battery, and he moves, which I believe are on this ridge here. He moves them across more into this area here, on the western side of the Genappe Road, and he's essentially trying to target this main section here that he's identified. And the French cavalry, we reckon they're probably in this area here somewhere. So you could argue that from Ney's point of view, with a few battalions still attacking around at La Haye-Sainte, then maybe he thinks that he has some sort of infantry support. At least if he can knock off the batteries off the top of the ridge there, then he can hopefully support the infantry near La Haye-Sainte. But he is going to be moving before any infantry can come to his aid from De Earle on his right and Rail on his left. And so these cavalry will begin to move up here, and they are described as moving in strength on the portion of the battlefield between La Haye-Sainte and Hougoumont. So we're in this section here. The front extends probably a mile, I would say. And he's not. He's obviously attacking here with no infantry or artillery support, which I believe Wellington is quite surprised about. Also, it means that the British infantry are given ample time to form square. These horses are not galloping all the way. In fact, though, they would kind of walk most of the way. And it's only on the last few hundred yards that they would actually probably try to charge, if they did. But they're almost sort of walking up here, keeping order. And so it gives the British infantry a lot of time to form square and prepare. The Allied infantry is... they have at least 7 batteries of artillery up here, and they're supported. So they have the artillery are essentially on this road with the infantry behind them, and then they still have some cavalry support behind that as well. Okay, so let's finish this section here. So we just began the the cavalry attacks of the French. We're under Ney's command, and we'll finish up. We'll just do a quick spin of the battlefield, and we'll end this part here. If you have been following along, thank you very much, and please like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next part. When we will talk about the attack of the cuirassiers on the Anglo-Dutch squares. Okay, I'll see you in a moment. Hello, welcome to Flight Past. My name is Simon, and we are following Napoleon's journey from Elba in 1815 all the way to Waterloo and probably beyond. We'll find out what happens to him after this. And we've got ourselves up here. We're flying now. We're circling in the Huey around the battlefield of Waterloo, and we got Guy in the back, and he's in blue today, and he will help us fly the Huey, make sure we don't crash. And if any of you want to find out about anything, just ask. If you want to see a certain part of the battlefield, you just we can just go and have a look at it. We can jump out and use the drone. But if you have been following along, we've got to the charge of the French cuirassiers on around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we've just come around now, and I'll show you where they began their charge. I say charge, it's more like they form up and then they come up, and they're coming up from this. They're forming up where my white dot is now, and they're going to go up to this ridge where this along here. And so they kind of walk really up this slope to this ridge at the time. It gives the British and the Brunswickers and the Anglo allies basically loads of time to form up square. They're essentially going to have they're on the reverse slope, forming up a square, and in front of them on this road here, the Arhane Road, they've got a line of artillery. So what will happen is that the artillery will fire until they get the cavalry get too close, and then they'll retreat back into the squares. And along as it's just cavalry, and then these squares should be able to hold on. So many people wrote at the time of how impressive this cavalry charge is, or at least the amount of horses involved. And many said, "Oh, this is going to be the end of us." They're essentially moving in between La Haye-Saint and Hougoumont. Hougoumont is this chateau here, and remember, there's an orchard where this dot is now, and extends this way with a wood. And so, if we just pause here, we'll just jump out, and we can. See, essentially, because there's going to be a withering fire from this side here, plus there's the chateau, the Haye-Saint farm here. The essential front is more like this sort of area here. It's about 1,000 yards, they say, from one side to the other, but with the these defensive positions that are forward of the line, essentially the front becomes around about 700 yards. So we're looking at essentially in this area here. On the far right, about 100 yards, this part of the road here is essentially a sunken road. It's almost 15 feet deep, it's reported as. So this is impossible for horses to maneuver through that part there. So we're then getting to essentially an area around about like that would be the attack front of this of the cavalry. Many of the British are veterans of the Peninsular War, some of them, and they knew, and Wellington would know as well, that essentially that if the squares hold and there's no and they're not the cavalry's not supported by artillery or infantry, then they should be able to hold out. Napoleon liked to use his armies with a sort of a mass, a shock effect, a psychological effect on troops. But if you were trained well and held your ground, then you could usually hold on. So it's essentially, once this occurs, it becomes a battle of who blinks first. A cuirassier, its horse weighs probably almost 2 tons in weight, and half a dozen horses ridden at some sort of formation speed would break any battalion. But with a combination of squares and fixed bayonets and basically a hedgerow of swords, you won't be able to get a horse to ride into those into those formations. Especially, the glinting shininess of the swords, the horse would just not attack. And so, what happens a lot of time with these charges? Now, they probably walked most of the way, maybe possibly charged later when you're maybe got to the frightened the artillery back. And the horses then sort of just get funneled around these squares back here. And the tactic would basically be where they kind of be into these sort of squares. They might be 2, 3, 4 ranks deep, and the back rank would fire, and the first 2 ranks would hold position with their bayonets facing outwards. And some of these squares would eventually receive waves upon waves of attacks of these horses. They would go through, ride past, come back, reform. They were probing, looking for weakness, and trying to intimidate these squares into breaking. Wellington still had, I think, around back here somewhere, he still had some mounted cavalry. Now we remember most of Ponsonby's and Somerset's brigades were missing. And at this point as well, it's believed that the Duke of Cumberland's regiment refuses to charge, and they actually quit the field altogether. And I mentioned this before, so it's not just there were elements of Dutch-Belgian cavalry who refused to attack, but it was the Duke of Cumberland's regiment that quit the field altogether. So it wasn't just the some of the the Dutch and the Belgian troops who were not trusted by Wellington. The Duke of Cumberland actually would ride back to Brussels in the distance there, and would report the defeat, Wellington's defeat. His unit was comprised of mainly wealthy Hanoverians. And they would forever be wrapped in shame for doing that. Captain Horace Seymour, he was the ADC to Uxbridge, and he said, he said about the Cumberland Hanoverian Hussars, he said that he held onto the bridle of the colonel's horse and remarked what I thought of his conduct, but all to no purpose. So he was actually caught quitting and still carried on. But the remaining cavalry did do some counter charges, forcing back the cuirassiers back for the gaps in the squares. And this enables the Allied gunners to come back up to their artillery and open fire again. And it's reported here as well, there was a group of cuirassiers who sort of came this way, and there was a, it might even be this road here, but there was like a dugout, sort of valley, but it had been blocked, and had hedges on either side, and they were trying, these cuirassiers were trying to get back, and they got trapped in this gully. And this is around about 4 o'clock now. Let's jump back in the helicopter. So around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, Ney's not troubled by this repulse. And he's seeing considerable movement, he believes, on the ridge. And it could just basically be Wellington's injured and wounded moving back. He believes he can see ammunition wagons retreating, but with all the smoke and all that sort of stuff, he basically decides to double down on his attack on the cavalry and keep on pushing. And this is again, it's possible that Ney was mixed up in battle. He's closer to the front. He thinks he can see a possible point of weakness in Wellington's line. He commits again to the attack, and he doesn't seek Napoleon's approval to do this. So essentially what we have by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then we've had 2 attacks. The first phase was with d'Erlon's attack on this side over here, and that essentially had a little cavalry support. And then the second phase, it is a cavalry attack, a series of cavalry attacks that has little infantry support. And so each lack of preparation or lack of coordination means that the attacks can be repelled by the most efficient formations available. So on this side over here in the first phase, the British infantry managed to form line because they're not threatened by cavalry. And in the second phase, the British infantry can form square because they're not threatened by infantry. And from Napoleon's position, well, what does he know? All he can see is probably 5,000 cuirassiers up here on this ridge. And so from his position back at Rossomme, the Rossomme farm, he's not in a position to see what it is that's occurring up here, because the squares are all formed up on the reverse slope. And it's essentially, this is the pattern of this afternoon, is that these repeated cavalry attacks is just not getting anywhere. And the British infantry are getting more and more confident in their ability to hold on. And so each attack becomes less and less impactful. And the French start to get more and more frustrated up here. And what's interesting as well is that down here, remember we heard of Napoleon has started to reorganize his Grand Battery. They started to move more over to this side here. And we're probably talking, let's just come round, and we're probably talking about in this section below us now. And he's got these batteries here in order to bombard this front center. But with the cuirassiers up on the ridge, they can't do that. They can't fire on their own horses. And so what happens is that the British infantry are actually welcoming the cuirassiers up here, because it means that they're not being fired upon by the French artillery. There's an interesting story as well. Because even though you could fire the cannonball and it hits the ridge, it will still bounce over or roll over. There was an interesting story about one guy, cannonball starts rolling down this slope here, and he foolishly puts his foot out to stop it like a football, and it just takes his foot off. Ouch, indeed. And there was other mistakes that were made at the time, whether or not is solely down to Ney, but he should have thought about this. There was no attempt at this point, when the cavalry was up there, for the French to go up to the British artillery and either drag them off the battlefield or spike them. So they didn't, or even to sort of cut the equipment. So it was an opportunity when the cuirassiers up there, they could have gone up there, taken the guns themselves, or even, as I say, spiked them, and to make their life easier. But every wave of cuirassier attack meant that the artillery men could come out, fire their guns, and go back into the square to keep cover. And there's reports at the time as well that the French are actually passing through the squares and actually reforming up in the hollows, they call it, behind the British lines. So it's a shame that this modern road is passed through part of the battlefield, but it would probably be where the modern road is now, that we're talking about, down in this area. Was a possible place where the French would try to sort of reform up their cavalry. Let's talk. Let's get a quote here. The other thing, of course, is that those Grand Battery that were down in the valley, they should have been brought up. If they could have been brought up at that point, then these squares would have been obliterated quite quickly. Let's talk a quote here. This is Sergeant Morris here. He was in the front face of one of the 2nd Battalion of the 73rd Foot. And he says, on their next advance, they brought some artillerymen and turned the cannon in our front upon us. So he does mention that they do try to turn around the British cannon and fired into us with grape shot, which proved very destructive, making complete lanes through us. And then the horsemen came to dash in at the openings. But before they reached, we had closed our files, throwing the dead outside and taking the wounded inside the square. And they were forced again to retire. They did not, however, go further than the pieces of cannon, waiting there to try the effects of some more grape shot. We saw the match applied, and again it came at us thick as a hail upon us. On looking around, I saw my left-hand man falling backwards, the blood falling from his left eye. My poor comrade on my right, also by the same discharge, got a ball through his right thigh, of which he died a few days afterwards. So that's interesting. So they do mention that they're not bringing up their own cannon, but they're actually turning the British cannon on them at some places. He then goes on to say that the next charge the cavalry made. They deliberately walked their horses up to the bayonet's point, and the next time the cuirasses made their appearance on our front, the life guards boldly rode out from our rear to meet them, and in point of numbers they seemed pretty well matched. The French waited with the utmost coolness to receive them, opening their ranks to allow them to ride in. It is a fair fight, and the French were fairly beaten and driven off. So again, it seems that it looks like maybe some of these squares were running out of ammunition at this point as well, which is interesting for them to actually come right up onto the bayonet point. $4 then. This is when Wellington needs to get his centre stronger, and it's at this point he realizes that it's unlikely that the French are going to try and outflank him now. Well, with the commitment of all the infantry and now all the cavalry, and so this is when he orders the Chassés Dutch-Belgian division, which was over here at Braine, Lalude, to move across to him. And he wanted this to be done in the most obvious manner towards the Nivelles Road, which would be essentially coming up this area here. And this is actually probably what the Mercer was saying that he fired upon by mistake, mistaking these Belgian troops for French. The French continue to do these waves of attacks. It goes on until 6 o'clock in the evening. French horsemen basically achieving nothing of any importance. Their horses become increasingly discouraged and exhausted, and the Allied infantry become ever increasingly confident, and the severest trial for these squares was when the their own artillery is used against them. Mercer, let's talk about what he describes these their attacks. He talks about them being allowed to advance unmolested until the head of the column might have been about 50 or 60 yards from them. And then they gave the word to fire, and he was firing case. The effect of the case was terrible. Nearly the whole leading rank fell at once, and the round shot penetrated the column and carried confusion throughout its extent. The ground, already encumbered with victims, the first struggle became almost impossible. He says that their fire was... These cuirasses were intent on reaching them. Their guns were of the squares that he was in between, firing. And he could say that when he sees the horses killed, he could see that the cuirassiers divested themselves of their encumbrance and making their escape on foot. Wellington, well, what does he do at this time? Well, during this cavalry attacks, he is seen riding continually along the line, and would seek refuge in a square whenever he had to. but he relied a lot on the quality of his mount Copenhagen to escape any issues, any attacks. Hello, O'Leary. Good to see you from Newfoundland and Labrador. Good to see you. I hope you're enjoying your World Cup. I watched the Canadians the other day. They were they did well. I think it was a draw. Right, so that is the. So I was supposed to say it's the third phase of the French tax, and there is actually a poem by William Makepeace Thackeray, and he wrote, "One charge to another succeeds, like waves that a hurricane bears. All day do our galloping steeds dash fierce on the enemy squares. At noon we began the fell onset. We charged up the Englishman's hill, and madly we charged it at sunset. His banners were floating still." And Wellington was asked later what was the bravest action that he saw on that day, and he actually replies that it was the repeated charges of the French cavalry at Waterloo was the bravest action he saw that day. Right, this is a good point then to have a quick break. And when we come back, we'll just finish off this stream. We've been going on now for a couple of hours. And we'll just do a bit of a wrap up here. And so we've got to around about 6 o'clock in the evening. But I think what we need to do when we come back in the next stream, we'll start talking about the Prussians and how they're getting on and how their approach to the battlefield is starting to affect this battlefield. So if you have enjoyed this, then please give a like, give a subscribe. If you're watching live, I will be back in a couple of minutes. And if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the next episode. And I'd just like to say, by the way, that the music that you hear is my music. So if you find I Piraten on your Spotify or your iTunes or Bandcamp, then give it a like or a play, and you'll help the channel in that way as well. Okay, I'll be back in a few minutes. All right, welcome. This is Flight Pass. My name is Simon. We're in the Huey and we are circling the battlefield of Waterloo. Welcome to the stream. And the idea of this stream is that we're going to be using the helicopter, using the drone to try to get a greater understanding of what occurred at the Battle of Waterloo, how the terrain affected the decisions made, so we can get a better understanding of what sometimes you write about, you read about, whether it was actually possible for that to happen at the time. A lot of the stuff from the Battle of Waterloo is written, many of the accounts that I've read have been witness accounts, but they've been written almost sometimes 20 years afterwards. Lieutenant William Siborne was tasked to create a model of the Battle of Waterloo, and he did a lot of research at the time in around about the 1840s, and trying to find out as many people's accounts. So you're talking 20 years later, these guys are trying to remember what happened, and so it's never going to be possible for them to remember all the details. You obviously get the sense maybe from their accounts. And of course, remember a lot of these accounts, especially from the leaders, the generals, and the dukes, they're writing about the Battle of Waterloo through rose-tinted glasses a lot of the time, and sometimes for political reasons. They're trying to change some of the events that happened, and it happens on both sides. There's a lot of blaming of Ney, there's a lot of blaming of Grouchy and Soult, and the same with Wellington. There's a lot of blaming of different elements of his army, or the way certain units behaved. So there's a lot of sort of, I'm not taking the blame stuff going on. So you kind of like have to sort of read between the lines a lot of the time when you are recounting these stories. And they obviously, a lot of the time, they'll be presenting themselves as the hero as well at the time, and that's what the sense you get with sometimes with Captain Cavalry Mercer is and his accounts. But he also does give you a very good sense of the sort of what it would be like to be in that action at the time. So we left the last episode. We were talking about the attacks and of the French cavalry cuirassiers up onto this ridge up here on our left. And let's just jump out here, and we'll go and have a look at it. And we believe Mercer's in this area here somewhere. His position is actually described as between two Brunswick squares. And he had... it's reported that his position was in a depression with a 2.5-foot bank that the road rested on. And this lower position meant that he was firing in a position, he says, up towards the cavalry with case shot at maximum effect. So, I mean, I think you're talking about this road here. You could possibly be imagining he would have his gun on this side of this rise, possibly. You can't trust this battlefield anymore because of this monstrosity here. But you can imagine that if he did have his gun on this bank, that's the sort of thing he's sort of talking about. Now, I am... this is an account as well from a French conscript who was one of the cavalry riders. Or a French cuirassier, sorry. not a conscript. He said, through the smoke, he says, I saw English gunners abandon their pieces. So he's riding up here, say, and all but 6 guns stationed under the road. So he talks about it being under the road. So it does suggest that they are on this this side of the road along here. And almost immediately our cuirassiers were upon the squares. So it sounds like if you imagine if you were here, you've got a Royal Horse Artillery battery firing here towards the French cuirassiers. They wait until they're very, very close, fire their last shot, and then they'll be running back into probably a square of Brunswickers in this sort of area here, which is down below. Can never get this right, but it's down here, away from the ridge. Now the way that the squares are formed here are so that they're offset, so that they're not going to be firing at each other. They've almost got like the corners, like that sort of thing, so that they're not firing on each other. Here, this French cuirassier actually mentions that the fire was drawn in zigzags, and that's how I kind of imagine what that means. He describes how these gunners he thought would be cut to pieces, but they kept firing with grape, which mowed down some of these horsemen like grass. Mercer goes on to talk about how the effect of the firing, he said the mass column he described as it was difficult to force into a retreat as the mass pressed forwards. So he's talking about a column of sort of cuirassiers moving up here from this direction that way. And he says that the front ranks, the ones right in front of his gun, they were he described them as almost fighting with their own men, trying to escape the out of the way of the cannon. And so he says that their presence there fighting was almost like a spark for them to almost turn into a mob to fight each other, trying to get out of their way. And they were even using their own swords, he says, sometimes on each other. Or trying to basically fight their way out of the way of the muzzle of the gun. So that's if you were talking that sort of thing, then you're coming up here, and yes, you're probably in this sort of range, and you are like, the gun is pointing exactly at me here, and so you're trying to just move out the way as much as possible. I keep seeing these things here, by the way. Presumably they mark things on the battlefield. If anybody knows what they are, there's that one there. It's probably a path or something with some markers. I've never actually visited the battlefield itself, so if anybody has and they know what these things are, they're sometimes dotted over the there's another one there. And there's another one there. Anyway, so you get that sense then that it's the panic of the front rank of these horsemen coming up, and they've got a well-trained Royal Horse Artillery battery right in front of you, and you're actually literally fighting with your own men to try to get out of the way. He then goes on to describe how in this way that the horses came up, it was actually the rear column, part of the column turned about. And this allowed then the front ranks to be able to pull away out of his way. The first death of Mercer's troop occurred during this attack. He says Gunner Butterworth was a number 7, or what's known as a sponger. After ramming the shot home, he got stuck in the mud, which pulled him in front of the muzzle just as it fired. So it sounds like he's sponging, and he probably slips, and then the gun fires, and he's... they say it blows both his arms off. He makes his way back to Mont St Jean, which is, I believe, this farmhouse here, but he dies bleeding to death before he reaches the farm. And Mercer would describe as well that when the waves of cavalry retreated back, presumably what they did, they either came over the top of the ridge here to the back, or they came back down here. We're in this sort of area here, down the slope. This enables the ground battery, which I believe is now in this sort of area here, to reopen fire. And Mercer recalls that when that happened, thankfully most of his troops were safe because this bank here protected them. Okay, so let's wrap up there, I think, for this part of the story. We've got to approximately 4:30. When I mentioned William Syborn, he was the guy who was making this model, and he was trying to do all this reports to try and find out what happened. And this is a book called The Wellington's Smallest Victory, and it's all about this guy. It's a really interesting book. It's written by Peter Hofschauer, and it's basically this guy was writing, making this model. Don't quote me on this, but it was around about the 1840s, 1850s, and it's around about the time that Wellington becomes Prime Minister as well of Great Britain. Now, he starts doing this reports, and he's trying to basically find. For his model, where is the most significant point of the battle to tell the story, because he can only capture one moment. And he believes, essentially, that he wants to capture the moment of, I think it's the time when the Old Guard are advancing up here, around about that time. Anyway, he starts doing these reports. And he states something that's really, really interesting in that in his interviews of people, and he interviewed a lot of Prussians as well, that he believed that around about 4:30, which is where we're talking around now, that there was possibly around 16,546, pretty precise, Prussians with 83 guns had arrived on the battlefield over here. So in the next stream, we're going to talk about this journey that the Prussians are making from Wavre, and see if this is feasible, and find out what's happening. And we'll find out then how the presence of the Prussians indirectly impacts the battle up here on this ridge here. And it's reported at this time, 4:30 as well, that Wellington, for the first time, hears a cannonade to the southeast. So we know that Wellington's probably in this area here, and southeast is in this direction, this way. And so he hears a cannonade, and it's the first big notification to him that the Prussians are beginning to exert an influence on the battlefield. It was a welcome sound to him, but it didn't mean immediate victory. He still needed to link up with the Prussians. But it does mean that Wellington can begin to prepare for a possible infantry attack. And it's at this time that he begins to bring up Adams' brigade of British infantry. And this brigade is it's essentially his reserve. It contains some of the best elements of the British Army. It's got the 1st Battalion of the 52nd, the 1st Battalion of the 71st, and 8 companies of the 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 95th. And they move across the Nivelles Road and form up in echelon north and east of the northeastern corner of the Hougoumont grounds. So when we talk about north, we're looking over here. This is north. This is probably the Nivelles Road. And so he's describing them moving into this area here, I believe. And this means that these light infantry, along with the batteries of artillery, can now act on the flank of the French horsemen. So we're looking at this section here. And they describe how the Hougoumont woods provided some cover from the French artillery over in this direction and possibly behind. So we're probably looking around this area here somewhere. And just to wrap it up then, so around about this time, Grouchy is now receiving Napoleon's dispatch that was timed at 1 o'clock, and Grouchy is engaging now the Prussians at the town of Wavre. So it means essentially that there is no possibility that Grouchy is going to be able to come to the aid of Napoleon, and he's not even essentially going to be able to stop the Prussians arriving by threatening their flank from this direction over here. The only thing he can now do is hold up one of the corps at Wavre, and he does that by he's engaging Thielmann's corps at Wavre. And back at the, we'll just finish now with a report that Sue mentions, and he was with Napoleon at this time back at Rosson, so we'll just fly there. And he talks about how Napoleon says, this premature movement may produce fatal results. Ney has compromised us as he did at Jena. And this is a reference to the Battle of Jena, which was a battle commenced on the morning of the 14th of October on 1806. This where the French, the Marshal Ney had completed his manoeuvres and had taken up position as ordered by Napoleon. However, once in position, Ney decided to attack the Prussian line despite having no orders to do so. which has proved to be disastrous. And it basically meant that Ney's initial assaults, although it was a success, he found himself to be overextended and was subject to heavy Prussian artillery. Napoleon mentions, or Sue says that Napoleon says, now you can take this again with a pinch of salt, but he says that Napoleon had said this has taken place an hour too soon, and what he means by that is the cavalry attack has taken place too soon. And he then says, but we must stand by what has already been done. It's and it's believed here that Napoleon has actually doubles down on what Ney has said, and he orders Kellerman to send his 2 divisions and all his cavalry to support Milhaud. And this is where Kellerman believes questions this order, because he thinks it's unwise to pour more troops up onto this ridge here without first getting Milhaud's exhausted divisions to move back and away. And so that might be a reason why more and more come up here and it gets quagmired. And eventually, I think it gets to the point where Kellerman thinks it's ridiculous. He moves his men up to the Hougoumont area here, and he essentially tells his carabiners, these 800 men, to halt and remain in that spot until a written order is given to him. And that meant that these cavalry are the sole reserve left. So it sounds from that exchange, it sounds like Napoleon has accepted that Ney's made a mistake going forward, and he's doubled down on that mistake. And at the same time, then he's getting pressure from his right-hand side, and this is turning exasperates this problem in a sense. He's using up all his French cavalry reserves now. And now he's got to commit a lot of his infantry reserves over to Plancenoit to stop the Prussians from attacking his flank. Right, I think that is a good place to finish up for today. And so in summary, then, we've finished this third phase of the battle. This is the attack of the French cavalry onto the British and Anglo-Allied lines, and the impact of those cavalry is weakened by the fact that there's been no infantry support and very weak artillery support. And we get to this the phase of the battle now where Napoleon is desperate because, as we say, Seibon believes that there's at least 16,000 Prussians pouring out of these woods here on his right-hand side. And so he's desperate now to try to force his way. And from down here at La Belle Alliance, or even Rossomme, which is back there, Napoleon, all he can see is that the cavalry is milling around on top of this ridge. And so we'll leave that there, and then in the next stream, which will be tomorrow on Twitch and YouTube, at around about the same time of midday in UK time. We'll fly over to Wavre, and we'll follow the Prussian advance from Wavre onto the battlefield over here on the eastern side of the battlefield. So I hope you've enjoyed that so far, and forgive my wafflings, but this is the way I do it. And we will continue our story about Waterloo tomorrow. And if you have been interested by this and you like the detail, you can go back and look at the YouTube playlist. There's over 70 episodes now following this journey all the way, and we'll continue. The idea is we'll follow Napoleon all the way back, probably to St. Helena, to wrap up this story. Yeah. You'll find that there's other playlists on the YouTube channel. You can see D-Day. We've done a whole series on D-Day, and we can go and have a look at that. If you have any questions, then please put them in the any comments. Even if you're watching this a year or two later, please put the comments in. Add any information. If you think you've got something interesting to say, some fact about Waterloo, then just put it in the comments, and we'll include it in the next show. And if you've got anything you want to see, again, just feel free to put it in the comments. And whenever you see this thing, don't be embarrassed. Put it in there, and we will incorporate your request into the show at some point. You become part of the production, and everything is tickety-boo. The idea of this channel is that it becomes a discussion place, and hopefully we'll get like-minded people who are interested in flying and in history. Right, well, I've waffled a lot so far, so and I will leave that there today. I hope you have a good rest of the day. Watch the football and all that, and I will see you tomorrow. Good luck.